Irish guy, and I almost feel like spitting out my chocolate pudding. Okay, let's be real, it's not pudding. Just a half-eaten yogurt I found at the dump. But lads, Manchester City 6, Manchester United 3. I mean, right now, people across the country are probably criticising the latter, right? Ripping through them with their verbal swords. I'm guessing the likes of Mark Goldbridge is right now comparing his beloved football club to some sort of brain-dead circus where the incompetent clowns just spend half the day kissing elephants. But lads, I'm going to begin this video with a change of tact. Firstly, I'm going to criticise Manchester City. This could have been epic for the club. Why do football teams always take their foot off the gas? I'm sorry, but you were 4-0 up at half time. I mean, we saw at Brentford. Clearly, when they had a 4-goal cushion over Manchester United, Thomas Frank clearly decided that, I don't know, maybe just feed his players waffles and chicken goujons at half time. Honestly, they had about as much hunger and motivation to score a 5th and 6th goal as Susan Boyle does to have a bath. But here, lads, in that first half, Manchester City bullied them. 2 goals each for Phil Foden and Erling Haaland. And Man United didn't have a prayer. And yet, Man United, they somehow won the second half. 3 goals versus 2. They are the first team to win a second half at the Etihad since Tottenham in February. I mean, lads, we have seen this exact game before. Go back to St. Stephen's Day or Boxing Day in 2021, and Leicester travelled to the Etihad and were also 4-0 down at half time. But then, goals from James Maddison, Ademola Lookman and Kelechi Iheanacho in the second half, and the game finishes 6-3. And Leicester actually come out of the game with credit. I mean, the story could and should it be about how the Foxes were neutered with a knife, slipping to a 7-0 crumbling. I mean, that should have had some Leicester fans questioning whether Brendan Rodgers actually has the defensive tactics of a sausage roll dipped in monkey sick. But instead, the game was labelled a 9-goal thriller. I mean, honestly, after that game, Brendan Rodgers came out of that game with credit. He was still tipped to be the next Man City boss. I'm sorry, City, but if you had showed the same tempo and aggression you showed in the first half, then this would have been Manchester City 8, Manchester United 0. And I'm sorry, but there's no coming back from that. And can someone please stop telling Sir Alex Ferguson to come to these games? At this stage, it's just getting weird. I mean, this guy's 80 years of age and just a few years out from brain surgery. He should be sitting at home with a chessboard and a pipe, not watching his beloved team being turned into the city's laughing stock. Honestly, what did he expect was gonna happen? Honestly, no, it's like someone's granddad is asking if he can watch his granddaughter do a poo in the sink. Just no! This is all just a bit sad. Manchester United was a dynasty he worked so hard to build, putting decades of his life into this work. So this would be a bit like if Sean Connery was still alive and people kept giving her front row seats to watch the next series of James Bond films when they're starring James Corden. Someone who probably devour a bin bag worth of hamburgers in between scenes and who has the magnetic charisma of a handful of sick. Sean doesn't want to see that. And yet, Man United were let off the hook. It's a bit like in those Saw films, and the bad guy just chooses to not let a bear trap rip off their arms, instead allowing them to just walk home and order a Chinese takeaway at Uber Eats. Speaking of which, that is what Jack Grealish did after the match. Even when he plays well, he still chooses to have the professionalism of a drunken dog. Although lads, on a weekend where Miggy Almiron was one offside call away from netting a Premier League hat-trick, Jack needed to play well. By the way, don't worry, I will be doing a second part of the Prem catch-up tomorrow, covering every other match, after MNF tonight. But lads, today is all about the City Derby. By the way, if you're new, slap the big fat red subscribe button. Getting so close to 150,000 subscribers. You absolute legends. Go on, time yourselves. I think it doesn't take you more than 0.3 seconds. Tell me if you can do it in less. Alright, anyway, back into the video. I mean, you had your City rivals by the throat, and yet instead, this just turned out to be a 3-goal win. That's it. I mean, you were able to do that in 2004. I mean, I remember, I was a little boy who sneaked into a pub to watch the game. And yeah, Sean Phillips was belting in a last-minute wonder goal in a 4-1 win. And yeah, I had a glass of 7-Up, although it must have looked like a hobbit trying to order a pint at the bar. I mean, to be fair, I didn't even have to use pocket money. It was just the €10 hush money the priest had given me in return for my silence. What? But yeah, you were recording 3-goal wins over Man United with Antoine Sibierski up front. I mean, will this game really be remembered forevermore? I mean, this was your 5th Premier League Derby Day win by 3 goals. But this is your chance to win by 7 or 8. Honestly, all that changed at half-time was Ten Hag asking Luke Shaw to play. But it's a bit like being in an airplane that's running out of fuel and it's on its way into crashing into a mountain, and so you choose to protect yourself by putting on a woolly hat. Lads, this should have been Manchester United punishment. Honestly, someone at half-time should have shown Guardiola a photo of his defaced mural. Maybe then he'd have been hungry for more, instead of just letting his players eat Jaffa cakes at half-time. Honestly, what were they doing at half-time? Just watching The Simpsons on their phones? Only 2 players scored for Manchester City yesterday. 2. That's not enough in a game like this. I mean, back in September 2009, Fergie was asked by a journalist whether Manchester United would ever go into a derby as underdogs. He responded by saying, "Not in my lifetime." Well, we're at a point now where Manchester United are turning up the Etihad and watching 2 different boys score a hat-trick. I mean, that's weird. 9 goals scored and just shared between Phil, Erling and Anthony. Okay, I realise 2 different Anthonys who scored, but still, there had only been 1 hat-trick in a Manchester derby in the Premier League before. Anthony Kanchelskis in a 5-0 win at Old Trafford back in 1994. But now, 2 in an hour. That is mental. Both Foden and Haaland leading with match balls. Although, to be fair, sorry to urinate on your parade, Phil, but you should give the ball back, you greedy little orc. Ozzy, the same way when Harry Potter sat in his train carriage and said, "I'll take the lot." No, the lunch lady should have slapped him in the face. There were about 100 nervous, hungry school children making that 9-hour trip to Hogwarts. And here was this guy stealing all their Kit Kats. And similarly, there is a rule that only 1 person takes home the match ball. And in the unlikely scenario where there's 2 hat-tricks in the same match, then the first one to bag a treble takes the ball. That's it. I'm sorry, but rules are rules. Just ask Marcus Bent. I mean, back in December 2007, Wigan beat Blackburn 5-3. But I mean, Rocky Santa Cruz completed his hat-trick on 61 minutes. Bent finished up his on 81. I mean, Rocky took home the matchday ball and earned a summer move to Manchester City. Bent only ever scored 1 more Premier League goal in his entire life, and he never got the match ball to stick in his house. So imagine him seeing the rules relaxed for grubby little Phil to take his one home too. I'm guessing poor old Marcus is probably sitting in his little suburban cottage, and Ozzy must feel like angrily throwing a bag of poo at his mum. I mean, people also forget because the story was 9-0, but Jimmy Vardy and Ioti Perry both scored hat-tricks in the same game. I mean, Perez, somewhat about as effective as a granny in a wheelchair. He scored 2 hat-tricks in 2 consecutive games against Southampton. That's a more embarrassing stat than the 9-0s. Well, listen, why? Why did Man City let United escape? Why did they show mercy in the second half? I mean, you might think that it would be cruel to push for more, right? Showing a lack of respect to the opponent. A bit like in Euro 2012 final when Iker Casillas begged the referee to blow up before his Spanish teammates were given the chance to score a 5th against Italy. That this would be the equivalent of beating up a deaf person on the bus, right? No, I'm sorry, but where was the mercy shown by Sir Alex Ferguson when he coached his team to put 8 past Arsenal? I mean, imagine how embarrassing that post-match glass of wine must have been with Arsene Wenger. I wouldn't have put it past the Frenchman to just bite off a chunk of broken glass. I mean, he just watched his Arsenal team lose 8-2 to a team with Danny Welbeck up front, Tom Cleverley in midfield, and Ashley Young on the wing. I mean, come on. There was only 1 world-class player in that Man United starting 11. Most of the others were just midfield puddles of cat piss. I mean, how did they concede 8? But here, City had the chance to do the unthinkable. You could have realistically have won 8-0. Why? Why did you stop? You allowed Manchester United to leave the ground almost buoyed and enthused. I mean, Anthony Martial left the ground on a hat-trick. I mean, it was literally the anniversary of his last ever goal. An entire year since scoring against Everton. I mean, he hadn't scored 2 in a game in 18 months when they beat Southampton 9-0. See, that's what City should have done here. Manchester United in that first half were a disgrace. Utterly no confidence on the ball. It was an embarrassment. And I'm sorry, but Ten Hag, you have to take the blame. This is without a doubt the club's toughest game of the season. And you've got a Galactico defensive midfielder sitting on the bench. And you choose to instead persist with local Scots. I don't care if you have been winning games with McTominay in the team. I mean, get Casemiro in the side. I think we've seen it against high-level opposition. McTominay is about as much use as a toilet made of cheese. Choosing to leave him out, it's pathetic. This was the reset button. It's after the international break. Get the Brazilian in your starting 11. You've essentially been given a luxury, a notoriously expensive toy, and yet you're choosing to chuck it under the bed. Ozzy, your dad paid 50 quid for that action, man, and yet you'd sooner play with a paper aeroplane. It honestly doesn't make sense. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson once told the press that Phil Jones could be Manchester United's greatest ever player. I can't help but feel that watching a different Phil score a Derby Day hat-trick, oh, well, that could have been an ironic punch to the nose. Foden is achieving the impossible. Lads, I thought the days of local childhood City fans breaking into the first team was long gone, but that was just a myth. That there was more chance of me eating a tennis racket for tea. I mean, I remember back in 2019, Guardiola said that Foden was the only City player he would ever sell, and I didn't believe it. I mean, it was around the same time where he said that Maurizio Sarri's Napoli was the greatest team he'd ever faced. I mean, back then, this guy was into hyping up Nathan Redmond. I mean, he loved exaggerating. I mean, that same summer, both Roma and Rangers were sniffing around signing Foden on loan. And yeah, sure, I'd have thought that fine. Steven Gerrard will get his claws into him, and so eventually Foden will one day wind up following him to Aston Villa and just be the modern day Jacob Ramsey. I mean, apparently Rafa Benitez tried to take him on loan for Newcastle to pair him in midfield with Sean Longstaff. I'm guessing the very thought of that alone would have caused Foden to violently vomit on his shoes. The fact that he never needed a single loan deal to find his feet, it's incredible. It's almost as if Pep didn't want other dressing rooms to infect his local talent. I mean, Bournemouth wanted him on loan too, but sharing a dressing room with Jack Wilshere? No. I mean, Pep would probably have sooner broken every bone in his face than allow Foden to hang out with his bad influence. Guardiola never rated Wilshere, so this, it would be a bit like how you wouldn't want your straight-A student of a son chilling out with a school delinquent who shoots birds and feeds his homework to the dog. Although, I do think Foden would have been in safe hands under Eddie Howe, and I'm gonna say this. Eddie Howe will one day coach Phil Foden. He will. Whether it's for England or even Manchester City, mark my words, Howe will manage Foden one day. But not only has Foden broken into a perfect Manchester City team, not only has he scored more than 50 goals for the club, but he's now got a Derby Day hat-trick at 22. Lads, Cristiano Ronaldo's record in derbies was 3 goals in 11 Premier League derbies. This was also the 7th derby where Ronaldo's been a Manchester United employee and lost. People seem to think that he's not used to losing the derby. Lads, he's lost more than he's won. Lads, Roy Keane said that it was disrespect not to play Ronaldo. But don't forget that historically, his performances in these games have been wet cow diarrhea. I mean, back in 2004, his first start against City was a 4-1 defeat in May 2004. Yeah, City finished 16th that season on 41 points. I mean, in November, he played the full 90 minutes at Old Trafford as City left with a clean sheet and a point. I mean, he played in a 3-1 defeat away at City, where he was sent off for a hideous 2-footed lunge on Andy Cole. And don't forget, City would finish that season with 9 defeats in their last 10 games, and were everybody's tips to get relegated the following year. I mean, he also played 90 minutes in a 2-1 defeat against City at Old Trafford. By the way, all these games were when City were poor. He had no excuse. This was the 4th Derby Day he'd missed. The others were through red card suspension, hip flexor injury last season, but weirdly, he was just completely let out of the squad in 2005, losing his place to Kieran Richardson, someone with the end product of baked beans. I don't think Ronaldo would have changed a thing. I mean, don't forget, he was playing up front the last time you were 4-0 down at half time, but him choosing to return to Old Trafford instead of taking the comfy gig at the end he had last summer. Oh, now he will look back at that decision and feel like choking on a biscuit. Up until that point, Ronaldo hadn't really made a bad career decision in his life. Choosing to join Man United in 2003 and Real Madrid in 2009 were perfect moves. I mean, listen, signing for Juventus wasn't a bad decision, although a move to PSG would have been good too, but returning to Old Trafford, this was a rushed last minute decision and it was horrible. Is this really how his Manchester United legacy is going to end? Being stuffed on the bench every week? Auntie, it's perverse. It's almost sick. Ronaldo should be a cherished Manchester United childhood memory. Not this! Honestly, it's a bit like if they bring out The Lion King 3. Except in this film, the great and powerful Simba has just been fed dead goats trapped in a zoo in Stoke. I mean, it's a bit like in Toy Story 5. Buzz Lightyear is having to dress up in a miniskirt and work street corners in Plymouth. I mean, this is degrading for Cristiano. And for all of us forced to watch this, he should have been a Manchester City employee last season. The 1-year stopgap before Haaland joined. This summer, he should be leaving Eddie Haaland as a Premier League champion. And right now, signing for Bayern Munich or Inter Milan. But this, imagine how embarrassing it is to have to explain this to his wife and son. I mean, to them, he's an absolute king. They're used to seeing him score in every match. But returning home to your lonely shepherd's pie and having to explain how you once again didn't get picked. I mean, he's playing less than Jesse Lingard played last season. I'm sorry, but it's not fitting for a legend. I mean, it's like seeing a cinematic icon like Ian McKellen, now just being spotted in Burger King with pizza down his front and a puddle of poo on the floor. Just, no! I don't want to see that! I don't want to see the great Gandalf the Grey piss himself live on Graham Norton. In the same way, I don't want to see a man with 5 Ballon d'Ors sitting beside Tom Heaton on a bench. But you know what? I'm actually pleased by who the City goal scorers were, because forget the money. Both Foden and Haaland supported Man City when they were poor. I mean, these aren't two football gold diggers like Grealish, who blatantly hoped that City would bottle the title race in 2012. No, Haaland liked City when they had Sean Wright-Phillips on the wing and a fat Robbie Fowler up front. But with Foden, I can't help but wonder where he would be if City weren't rich. Because imagine if Mike Ashley hadn't allegedly vomited in a fireplace to mess up a business meeting with Sheikh Mansour. Imagine if City are now just a mid-table championship team being coached by Steve Bruce or Joey Barton. Foden would probably be Manchester United captain. I mean, just like Ryan Giggs, Foden would have been nicked from the City Academy, and honestly, and I say this respectfully, He'd be the modern day Duncan Edwards, a local lad on course to be one of the best players in world football. When Fergie said that Phil Jones could one day be the best Manchester United player of all time, I think some fairy godmother must have come to Fergie in a dream and whispered the words, "Get Phil," in his ear. It's just, he thought they meant just go and buy that Oafish centre back from Blackburn, instead of, robbing Manchester City's academy child. I mean, Foden could have been groomed as the next Paul Scholes. Honestly, I'm convinced in another life, Foden is being hailed as a Manchester United legend. The modern day Brian Robson. Lads, you all messed up. Back in 2009, Man United were too bothered about snapping up Paul Pogba by buying his mum a house. Yeah, that same summer, 9-year-old Phil went to City. What did his mum get? Probably nothing more than a bowl of custard creams and a hug. Honestly, Foden, to look at him, he just seems like a scruffy young ball of mischief. A bit like Philip off Shameless. I mean, 2 years ago, Gareth Southgate was dumping him from the England squad after he was caught playing spin the bottle in a hotel room with a couple of Icelandic girls and Mason Greenwood. I mean, I think most wrote him off as a bad egg. A little oik. Another Dele Alli. I mean, he does look like someone who should be out stealing motorbikes and punching Jack Russells in the teeth. I mean, he does look like someone who probably spent his school years selling fake Pokemon cards to the blind and, I don't know, egging his neighbour's house on Halloween. But no, lads, I'm gonna say this. He is the best English talent this country has produced since Wayne Rooney. He's unbelievable, and after Harry Kane, first name on the team sheet for England, build a side around, he's like an English Iniesta, and yet he's not even guaranteed a spot. But I mean, you know what, I get it, because I'm sure if Andres was born in Peterborough or Nottingham, he'd have probably also been on the England bench. I wouldn't put it past the brain-dead English coaches to have chosen Gareth Barry instead of him. I mean, Sven stuck Scholesy on the wing. But honestly, Manchester United fans, I'm convinced in a parallel universe, Foden is an Old Trafford superstar. Netting a treble past you on Derby Day. Anyways, let me know what you think, and let me know what are your thoughts. Alright, Premcast will come back tomorrow, let me know. Alright, if you enjoyed the video, thanks for as always, I'll talk to you in a while.